Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. Sarah had always believed that some secrets were meant to stay buried. But sitting in her car that rainy October evening, watching the droplets race down her windshield, she realized that the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. What her best friend's son had whispered to her just moments before would change everything she thought she knew about love, friendship, and the delicate threads that bind hearts together. The evening had started innocently enough. Sarah was picking up groceries when her phone buzzed with a text from her longtime friend Elena. "Could you give Marcus a ride home from soccer practice? I'm stuck at work and David's flight is delayed." Sarah didn't hesitate to say yes. After all, she'd known Marcus since he was 7 years old, and now at 22, he was like family to her. What she didn't expect was how the 10-minute drive would unravel years of carefully constructed boundaries and leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about herself. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain as Sarah pulled into the parking lot of the community center. She spotted Marcus immediately, his tall frame leaning against the brick wall, soccer bag slung over his shoulder. Even from a distance, she could see he'd grown into the kind of man who turned heads without trying. His dark hair was tousled from practice, and there was something different about the way he carried himself now, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there when she'd last seen him at Christmas. "Thanks for the rescue, Sarah," Marcus said as he slid into the passenger seat, his voice deeper than she remembered. "Mom said you were nearby." "It's no trouble at all," Sarah replied, starting the engine. "How's school going? Your mother mentioned you're in your final year." Marcus nodded, but she noticed he seemed distracted, his fingers drumming against his knee. "Yeah, architecture. Almost done, actually." He paused, glancing at her sideways. "You know, I've been thinking about you lately." The comment caught Sarah off guard. She felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. Surprise, perhaps, or maybe something more dangerous. "Oh? That's sweet of you to say. I mean it," Marcus said, his voice softer now. "I've been thinking about a lot of things, actually. About growing up. About the people who shaped me." He turned to look at her fully, and Sarah felt the weight of his gaze. "You were always different from the other adults in my life. You actually listened to me, treated me like I mattered." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Of course you mattered, Marcus. You still do." The silence that followed felt charged with something Sarah couldn't identify. She focused on the road, but she was acutely aware of Marcus's presence beside her. The way he smelled of soap and something uniquely him. The way his breathing seemed to match the rhythm of the windshield wipers. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met under different circumstances? If we were closer in age? If you weren't my mom's best friend?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Marcus, I know it's complicated," he interrupted gently. "I know there are 1,000 reasons why it doesn't make sense. But I can't stop thinking about it. About you." Sarah pulled over to the side of the road, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rain had started in earnest now, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. "What are you saying?" Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and turned to face her completely. "I'm saying that I think I've been in love with you for years, and I'm finally old enough to understand what that means." The words seemed to echo in the small space of the car, mixing with the sound of rain against the roof. Sarah stared at Marcus, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of joke, but his expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. "Marcus," she whispered, "you don't mean that." "I do," he said simply. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Sarah's mind raced. Marcus was Eleanor's son, her best friend's child whom she'd watched grow up. But looking at him now, she couldn't deny that he was no longer a child. He was a man, with a man's eyes and a man's voice, and the way he was looking at her made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. "You're 22, she said, as if stating his age would somehow make the situation clearer. "And you're 34. Marcus replied without hesitation. "I've done the math, Sarah. I know exactly how old you are, and I know exactly how old I am. Age is just a number when two people connect the way we do." "Connect?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Marcus, we barely see each other anymore. Holiday dinners, the occasional. That's exactly my point," Marcus interrupted, leaning closer. "Even with all the distance, all the time that's passed, I still feel this pull toward you. Don't you feel it too?" Sarah closed her eyes, trying to block out the intensity of his gaze. The truth was, she had felt something over the years. A warmth whenever Marcus was around. A special fondness that went beyond the typical relationship between a family friend and a child. But she'd always attributed it to watching him grow up, to being proud of the young man he was becoming. "Your mother is my best friend," Sarah said finally. "She trusts me." "And she should," Marcus said. "I'm not asking you to betray that trust. I'm just asking you to be honest with yourself. With me." The rain was coming down harder now, and Sarah realized they'd been sitting there for nearly 10 minutes. She should start the car, drive him home, pretend this conversation never happened. But something kept her rooted in place, something that whispered that this moment was important, that it deserved to be heard. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "I want you to tell me I'm not crazy," he said. "I want you to tell me that all those times over the years, when we talk for hours at family gatherings, when you'd really see me and understand me in a way that no one else did, I want you to tell me that meant something to you too." Sarah's throat felt tight. She remembered those conversations. How easy it had been to talk to Marcus. How mature he'd seemed even as a teenager. She'd always admired his thoughtfulness, his creativity, the way he could make her laugh even on her worst days. It did mean something, she admitted quietly. "You've always been special to me, Marcus, but not in the way you're thinking." "How do you know what I'm thinking?" Marcus asked. "How do you know what's in my heart unless you look at what's in your own?" The question hung between them like a bridge Sarah wasn't sure she was brave enough to cross. She looked at Marcus really, looked at him and saw not the 7-year-old boy she'd first met, but a man with kind eyes and strong hands and a heart that seemed to beat in rhythm with her own. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Most of the best things are," Marcus replied. The silence stretched between them, filled with the percussion of rain and the weight of unspoken possibilities. Sarah found herself studying Marcus's profile in the dim light of the car, the way his jaw had sharpened over the years, the way his eyes held depths she was only beginning to fathom. "Tell me about when you first knew," she said softly, surprising herself with the question. Marcus smiled, and for a moment, she caught a glimpse of the boy he'd been. "I was 16. It was at that barbecue your family threw for the 4th of July. You were wearing this blue dress, and you were laughing at something my dad said. And I just ... I couldn't look away. I kept thinking about how beautiful you were, how alive you seemed." Sarah remembered that day. She'd been going through her divorce, trying to keep up appearances while her world crumbled around her. Marcus had sought her out later that evening, sitting with her on the porch steps while the fireworks lit up the sky. "You told me that night that everything would be okay," she said, the memory surfacing clearly now. "You said that sometimes life breaks us down so we can rebuild ourselves stronger." "I was trying to be wise," Marcus said with a self-deprecating laugh. But really, I just wanted to make you feel better. You looked so sad, and I couldn't stand it. You were 16, and you were comforting me about my divorce, Sarah said, shaking her head. That should have been a red flag. Should it? Marcus asked. Or should it have been a sign that I cared about you in a way that went beyond normal boundaries? The question made Sarah's chest tighten. She'd always prided herself on being perceptive, on understanding people and situations. But sitting here now, she realized she'd been blind to something that had been growing right in front of her. Your mother would never forgive me, Sarah said. My mother wants me to be happy, Marcus replied. She wants you to be happy too. And I think, deep down, she'd understand that happiness doesn't always come in the package we expect. Sarah thought about Elena, about their friendship that had weathered divorces and career changes, teenage rebellion and family crises. Elena was one of the most open-minded people she knew, but this would test even her progressive nature. What are you asking me to do, Marcus? I'm asking you to go to dinner with me, he said simply. Not as your best friend's son, not as the kid you've watched grow up, as a man who's interested in getting to know the woman who's captured his heart. The simplicity of the request somehow made it more overwhelming. A dinner. Such a small thing. And yet it would change everything. I don't date younger men, Sarah said. You don't date anyone, Marcus countered gently. When's the last time you went on a real date? When's the last time someone made you feel alive, desired, cherished? The words hit closer to home than Sarah wanted to admit. Since her divorce 3 years ago, she'd thrown herself into work, into her friendships, into anything that would distract her from the loneliness that had become her constant companion. She'd convinced herself that she was content, that she didn't need romance or passion or the complicated beauty of falling in love. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of this, she said, gesturing between them. Of hurting people I care about. Of making a mistake that can't be undone. Marcus reached across the space between them, his fingers barely grazing her hand. Even that small contact sent electricity through her entire body. What if it's not a mistake? He asked. What if it's the thing you've been waiting for without even knowing it? Sarah looked down at their hands, his young and strong, hers marked by years of living, but still capable of tenderness. She thought about all the reasons this was impossible, all the ways it could go wrong. But she also thought about the way her heart had skipped when he'd first spoken her name tonight, the way she'd felt more alive in the past 20 minutes than she had in months. One dinner, she said finally, so quietly she wasn't sure he'd heard her. One dinner, Marcus agreed, his thumb tracing a small circle on her wrist. And then we'll see what happens. The drive to Marcus's house was quiet, but the silence felt different now, charged with possibility rather than discomfort. Sarah found herself stealing glances at him, noting the way his hands rested confidently in his lap, the way he seemed to radiate a calm certainty that she envied. Saturday, Marcus said as they pulled into his driveway. There's a little Italian place downtown, Antonelli's. Do you know it? Sarah nodded. She'd driven past it countless times but never had a reason to go in. 7 o'clock? Perfect. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt but didn't immediately get out. Sarah, I want you to know that whatever happens, I don't regret telling you how I feel. Some things are too important to keep inside. I'm still not sure this is a good idea, Sarah said honestly. The best things in life rarely are, Marcus replied. He leaned over and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek, his lips lingering for just a moment longer than friendship would dictate. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes. As he got out of the car, Sarah touched her cheek where his lips had been, feeling the warmth that lingered there. She watched him walk to his front door, noting the confidence in his stride, the way he turned back to wave before disappearing inside. The drive home felt surreal. Sarah kept replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, every gesture. By the time she reached her apartment, she was second-guessing everything. This was crazy. She was Elena's best friend, for God's sake. Marcus was practically family. What was she thinking? But as she got ready for bed, she found herself standing in front of her closet, unconsciously cataloguing what she might wear on Saturday. The blue dress that brought out her eyes, the black one that made her feel sophisticated. She caught herself and laughed, shaking her head at her own foolishness. Her phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, her heart skipped, thinking it might be Marcus. But it was Elena. Thanks for picking up, Marcus. You're a lifesaver. Hope he wasn't too much trouble. Sarah stared at the message for a long time before typing back. No trouble at all. He's grown into a wonderful young man. You should be proud. I am. We should get together soon. I feel like I barely see you anymore. The guilt hit Sarah like a physical blow. Here she was, planning a secret dinner with Elena's son. And Elena was reaching out in friendship. What kind of person did that make her? She set the phone aside without responding, unable to find words that wouldn't feel like lies. That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. She thought about Marcus's words, about the way he'd looked at her with such intensity and certainty. She thought about the years of friendship with Elena, about the trust that might be broken, about the gossip and judgment that would surely follow if anyone found out. But she also thought about the way her heart had felt when Marcus had taken her hand, about the spark of life that had ignited in her chest when he'd spoken of love and connection, and the courage to reach for what you want, when it finally came, was filled with dreams of blue dresses and candlelit dinners, of conversations that stretched into the early morning hours, of the possibility that sometimes the most unlikely love stories were the ones worth telling. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe was conspiring to make the evening perfect. Sarah had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that made her feel elegant without trying too hard. She'd applied her makeup with more care than usual, choosing a lipstick that was bold enough to make her feel confident, but subtle enough to not look like she was trying too hard. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been in years, the kind of nervous that made her hands shake slightly as she drove downtown, the kind that made her check her reflection in every mirror she passed. Antonelli's was tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk through large windows. Sarah paused outside, taking a deep breath before pushing through the door. The restaurant was intimate, with small tables draped in white linens and candles flickering in glass holders. She spotted Marcus immediately, sitting at a corner table, and her breath caught. He was wearing a navy blazer over a white shirt, his hair styled with more care than usual, and when he looked up and saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You look stunning," he said, standing to pull out her chair. The gesture was old-fashioned, romantic, and it made Sarah's heart flutter. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, settling into her seat. "I wasn't sure you'd actually be here." "I've been here for 20 minutes," Marcus admitted with a grin. "I was afraid you'd change your mind." "I almost did," Sarah said honestly. "About 6 times. They ordered wine, a bottle of Chianti that Marcus selected with surprising knowledge, and fell into conversation as naturally as they always had. That there was something different now, an undercurrent of awareness that made every shared laugh feel more intimate, every accidental touch of hands reaching for bread feel electric. Tell me about school, Sarah said, trying to ground herself in safe territory. Architecture, right? Are you enjoying it? Marcus nodded, his eyes lighting up. I love it. There's something about creating spaces where people can live and love and dream. It feels important, you know? Like I'm contributing to something bigger than myself. That's beautiful, Sarah said, and she meant it. I'd love to see some of your work sometime. I'd like that, Marcus said, his voice soft. I've actually been working on a project that reminds me of you. Of me? It's a community center, he explained. A place where people can come together, find support, build connections. When I was designing it, I kept thinking about how you've always been that for people, a safe harbor. A place where someone can be themselves and feel accepted. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I don't know if I'm that person, Marcus. You are, he said with quiet certainty. You've always been that for me. The conversation flowed through dinner, touching on books they'd both read, movies they'd loved, dreams they'd harbored. Sarah found herself sharing things she rarely talked about: her fear of never being truly known by someone, her regret about the time she'd wasted in her marriage, her secret dream of traveling to Italy someday. Why Italy? Marcus asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. The art, the history, the way people there seem to understand that life is meant to be savored, Sarah said. I've always imagined myself sitting in a cafe in Florence, watching the world go by, feeling like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We should go, Marcus said simply. We? Someday, he said, his eyes holding hers. When you're ready for that kind of adventure. The casual way he spoke of a future together made Sarah's heart race. Marcus, we haven't even finished our first date. I know, he said, smiling. But I have a good feeling about us. As dessert arrived, tiramisu that they shared, feeding each other small bites with an intimacy that surprised them both, Sarah felt herself relaxing into the possibility of what they might become. This man, this beautiful, thoughtful man, was interested in her not despite her age or her connection to his family, but because of who she was as a person. I have a confession, Marcus said as they lingered over coffee. I've been planning this dinner for months. Not this specific dinner, but the idea of it. I kept hoping I'd find the courage to ask you out. What gave you the courage tonight? Sarah asked. The realization that some regrets are worse than any risk, Marcus said. I couldn't live with myself if I never told you how I felt. As they walked to their cars, Marcus took Sarah's hand, intertwining their fingers with a naturalness that made her breath catch. The evening air was cool against her skin, and she found herself not wanting the night to end. Thank you for taking a chance on me, Marcus said, as they stopped beside her car. For taking a chance on this. Thank you for being patient with my fears, Sarah replied. For being brave enough to say what I was too scared to acknowledge. Marcus stepped closer, and Sarah felt the world narrow to just the two of them. The warmth of his body and the intensity of his gaze. May I kiss you? He asked softly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and perfect, filled with years of unspoken longing and the promise of something beautiful. When they broke apart, Sarah felt like she was seeing the world in color for the first time. I'll call you tomorrow, Marcus said, pressing his forehead against hers. I hope so, Sarah whispered. As she drove home. Sarah's lips still tingled from the kiss, and her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She thought about Elena, about the conversation they would need to have, about the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like those challenges were worth facing. Because sometimes The most unexpected love stories are the ones that have the power to change everything. Sarah stood in front of the mirror in her apartment, adjusting the necklace Marcus had given her for her birthday, a simple silver pendant with a small architectural drawing of the Florence Cathedral. She could hear him in the kitchen, humming softly as he prepared dinner, and the domestic intimacy of the moment made her smile. The past 6 months had been a journey of discovery, of learning to navigate the complexities of an unconventional relationship while staying true to the love that had brought them together. There had been difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and the challenge of telling Elena, who had surprised them both with her eventual support after the initial shock. Love doesn't ask permission, Elena had said after taking several weeks to process the news. And if you make each other happy, then I'm happy for you. Now, as Sarah prepared for another dinner at Antonelli's, their place, as they'd come to think of it, she reflected on how much her life had changed. Marcus had graduated with honors and landed a position at a prestigious architecture firm. Sarah had finally booked that trip to Italy, and they were planning to go together in the fall. "Almost ready?" Marcus called from the kitchen. "Just about," Sarah replied, taking one last look in the mirror. She saw a woman who looked younger, more vibrant, more alive than she had in years. Love, she'd discovered, was indeed the best cosmetic. As they walked into the restaurant, Sarah noticed other couples around them, some young, some older, all at different stages of their romantic journeys. She thought about the whispered confession in her car that rainy October evening, about the courage it had taken to say yes to something that seemed impossible. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Just how grateful I am," Sarah said, "that you were brave enough to speak your truth. And I'm grateful you were brave enough to listen," Marcus replied, bringing her hand to his lips for a soft kiss. Outside, the rain began to fall again, just as it had that first night. But this time, Sarah felt no urge to take shelter. She was exactly where she belonged, with the man who had whispered his love into existence and taught her that the heart knows no boundaries when it comes to finding its home. Some secrets, she realized, were meant to be shared. And some love stories, no matter how unconventional, were meant to be lived. The whisper that had once haunted her had become the foundation of the most beautiful chapter of her life. And as Marcus smiled at her across the candlelit table, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of their story, a story that would echo through their hearts for years to come.